This is Conversation Balloons, a podcast of interviews with experts and friends about all things generational. I'm your host, Leah Farish. We're glad to have you back at Conversation Balloons. We'll be talking today about how to prepare kids for college, and I have the perfect guest for that. Gene Burk is the creator of College Prep Genius, a program that has helped tens of thousands of high school students prepare for standardized tests and land scholarships at the college of their choice. The product of 20 years of research and experience, her work has been featured on all the main TV outlets like Fox, NBC, ABC, CBS, and print media. And we just appreciate your coming on, Jean.
Well, Leah, thank you so much for having me.
Before we dive in, I want to tell my listeners that we have some other episodes that relate to this, but don't duplicate the information here. When the Empty Nest Hurts is episode 65. If you're a parent and you're thinking about what will it feel like to have that college student gone from my day-to-day life, it's a wonderful episode. Another one is episode 58, How to Get the Most Out of College, with Elliot Felix. He's written a very popular book on that, and it was our most watched episode, I believe, to date. There was an interview with Jeremy Tate of the Classic Learning Test called Classical Learning for a Change, and that was episode 37. So those are some other resources for you, but there's nothing like what we're going to hear today. You give strategies for college success mainly based on strategies for standardized tests, right?
Yes, that is correct.
And, I've thought about, some people say, oh, well, I just want my student to learn the substantive wisdom from their courses, and if they've mastered the data, they'll do great, and I don't need to worry about standardized tests. Or, K through 12, our schools haven't emphasized standardized tests, so we don't want to, delve into that. But with the trades becoming a more common option for students not even going to college, they use standardized tests often for certifications, for testing your training along the way, licensing. Even a driver's license has a standardized test attached to it. Continuing education in the professions often uses standardized testing, and there are strategies for every test. Tell us about the main tests involved in college admissions.
Well, and you're absolutely right what you just said. You could have a really, really smart student. As a matter of fact, a valedictorian of a school, and they very often bomb the test. I teach in public school, private school, homeschools, parochial schools, and most of the students are the top 10% because these tests are not about your IQ or the content that you've learned or the curriculum that you've been using. They are based on logic, and they're testing your critical thinking skills. And it's a completely different skill set, and that is why a lot of students don't do well. So the main tests when it comes to getting into college and getting scholarship money are the SAT and the ACT. Those are the two main ones. And as you mentioned, the CLT, which partnered with us back in 2017. So we created a program from an actual CLT test they gave us. So we're their unofficial, official SAT prep company that they recommend. And but whether you're taking the SAT, ACT, or even the CLT, they are logic tests. Even Jeremy Tate himself said the CLT is a logic test because a 4.0 at one high school is not the same at another. Every school calculates their scores differently. So the only fair way a college can compare, let's say, a homeschool student in Texas versus a public school kid in Florida versus a private school kid in California is a standardized test. It levels the playing field because one student could have really hard classes, hard teachers, and let's say they had a unweighted 4.0, but then his next door neighbor goes to a school where there's easy teachers, there's easy classes, and he also has a 4.0. So now on paper you look the same. So there has to be some kind of numerical component that's common to all applicants. And that's why a standardized test is used, because it basically levels the playing field. But all three of those tests are used not only to get in, to get accepted, but also for scholarship money, which is what we're all about.
No, that's so important. And standardized tests also, I was talking to a college admissions counselor yesterday, and she said also, especially in state schools, the standardized tests get you not just money, but into things called different titles like the President's Circle or Honors College or something, which directs you to the best professors, the best internships, the best research opportunities. And then you have that network with these real leaders in their academic fields for letters of recommendation for, career or grad school. Um, One of my kids got into a special honors dorm because of their great test scores. And that was a dorm that was more, the students were just more focused on their academics. It wasn't so noisy and crazy. And they had special activities for them. So there are all kinds of rights and privileges that you get, but definitely the scholarship money is so important. And we don't want these students to be saddled with debt when they get out. It's just tragic what happens to so many families when they get in over their heads.
It takes the average student 20 years to pay off college debt. That is 2 decades of your life that you're paying for something that you did in 4 years. There's no college worth that. That is a lousy investment. It cripples your future. You see these graduates who can't buy a house, or they delay getting married, having kids because of
Mm-hmm.
the enormous debt that they're in, and it doesn't have to be that way. The great thing about a standardized test also is if you understand why colleges give so much money, it changes everything. I like what you just said about the President's Circle. That is such an inside information that most people don't even know about. But colleges get their national rankings based on test scores. So when students come with a high test score, it elevates their rankings, which in turn gives them more funding. It helps them to attract students who can pay full price, because the students who have that kind of money, they want to go to higher ranking schools. It also helps when you have a very talented athlete to come to the school, but they only need a minimum to get in, a minimum score. So that's going to drop their ranking. So they need more high scores to fill that gap and to bring them back up. So it's a win-win situation. And you end up, hopefully graduating completely debt free, which is totally life changing for most people.
Yeah. Okay. Tell us about the main tests that are used for college admission, and are they all about the same in terms of how you prepare?
So that's such a good question, because uh, before 2024 or March of 2024, SAT, ACT, even CLT were all about 99 up to 99% the same, because there was such a crossover information. But if we all go back to 2020, when the lockdowns happened and all the SATs and ACTs were canceled, um, these companies couldn't roll out a digital test fast enough, so they lost a lot of money. So SAT decided to go digital online, so that would never happen again, and they changed their test March of 2024. So to follow suit, the ACT is changing this year. They're doing some beta testing now, and they're going to finalize everything by September. So you have three totally different tests now. So we had one program that people would use it on all three tests, but now they didn't ask my opinion if they should change it, and so they did. And so what happened is now you've got three different tests, but they're, again, to me, and you'll hear Jeremy Tate say this too when he talks about the CLT. It's a race to the bottom. I see the SET and the ACT constantly dumbing down their test. When they were both about 3 hours, now they're going to be, well, the SAT now is 2 hours and 14 minutes, and the ACT will ultimately end up being 2 hours and 5 minutes. And the CLT, is only 2 hours. And I think a lot of the competition came from the CLT because during the lockdowns, every college would accept the CLT if they knew about it because of the fact that it was remotely proctored already. So I think their enrollment went up like 5,000% a week, but they were
Well,
already a shorter test.
well, and do they ask the same kinds of questions? Let's get into the content of these tests, and that's certainly the heart of your prep curriculum. Tell us about what they're looking for and how you prepare them.
So I'll give you an example. Since the SAT just changed, it went from these long passages with about 10 questions to 54 short passages with one question. And they give you a little over a minute per question. So what happens is most students will read that passage, read the question, read all the answers, and then they'll think to themselves, what are they looking for? And then they'll go back and reread it maybe 2 or 3 times. Now you're probably hitting around the 2 or 3 minute mark when you only have about a minute. So you're burning up the clock. But when these standardized test companies create these tests, they write them in a way that there's, of course, a long way to work them out, and then there's a very fast way. So what we do is we show them, for example, the logical patterns. They are limited by their own design. They create the patterns, and we teach the students how to logically look at the pattern, the passage, for example, to find the answer. If you there are on the new SAT, there are 5 types of passages and 14 subcategories of questions. So, for example, if you had a passage with a blank, precise word or phrase, then what we teach the students is okay, they're going to put the answers in the same place every time. They have no choice to do that because they're a standardized test and they have standardized questions and they have standardized answers. That means they can't randomly change it up. So that means every time the answers are going to be in the same place. So that particular subcategory of question, we say, okay, when you see which gives the most precise word or phrase, then what you do is you find the blank in the passage, you find the punctuation mark that's closest to the blank, then you highlight that information following the punctuation mark. They give you a highlighting tool that you can use on the test. We use an actual highlighter in our classroom to mimic that, and then they can transfer that to the real test. And then you highlight that information right after the punctuation mark, and then you look at the answers, and then you find the answer that basically restates what you just highlighted. And that's it. So you probably can do it in 10, 20, 30 seconds at the most once you understand the patterns. And you skipped 70, 75% of the passages without even having to read them.
Hmm. Wow. That's very specific. How about on like science and quantitative questions?
So every math, let's talk about math. Math, whether it's SAT, ACT, or the CLT, is quantitative reasoning. Um, the, you don't have to be a math genius. These are not high level, college level math questions. What they are is these questions are written in a way to purposely mislead the student, and the wrong answers can be very appealing. And so, even on the math, you could see. Uh, Obviously, this might take you 2, 3 minutes to work out, which again you'll never finish on time. Or they create it in a way that there's a fast way to answer every single question, no matter math. And you don't have to be a math genius because I get a lot of students who are really good in math. They love math. It may be their favorite subject in school, but it tends to be their lowest test score because they're so used to working out everything the long way, showing all their work, and they're going to get behind by 2 to 3 questions every time when you spend so much time per question. Even the science section on the ACT, you don't even have to know one iota of scientific knowledge on the science section. It's not about science. It's just still a logic test. And every question can be answered quickly. Because if you think about Leah, every school, every homeschooler, every state all use a different science curriculum. How can they test you on content because of the so many variations of science books and uh, experiments and everything there is? So they're not testing you on that. Now they'll use sciencey type question answers and words like molecules and molten magma and all this, but it really has nothing to do with your scientific knowledge. If you've never had physics or anatomy or biology, you can still get every answer correct.
No, that's encouraging. I suppose. I hope that's really it. Does that predict? Do high scores on these tests predict success in college?
Well, you got to think of it this way. I mean, you could get a perfect SAT or ACT score and still flunk out of college. I mean, that's you still got to get into college and do the work. But I think what they do predict is critical thinking skills, which is a sign of college readiness. And what colleges do is they save years and years and years of data. So they could take a student who applies for college this year, and let's say they got a 1350 SAT. They could look at back 5 years, 10 years, 15 years ago, and look at every student who got somewhere around a 1350 to see how well they did. Because the thing about it is right now, about by the end of the freshman year, 25% of students have already dropped out of college.
Wow.
By the end of the sophomore year, 50% have dropped out. And when it's all said and done, only about one third of all students who enroll in college are going to end up graduating. And so that means two-thirds dropped out either because of finances, because of the workload, or for whatever reason. And so to have a dropout rate on a college, it looks pretty bad. So colleges are very much like the military. They play the long game. The military is not looking for cadets, they're looking for officers. And colleges are not looking for applicants. There's many of those. What they're looking for is those students who are going to end up being supporting alumni. Those are the ones who are going to come to the school. They're going to fill up the clubs. They're going to go to the football games, and then ultimately they're going to come back and support them with their dollars. And so they know that by all the recorded data that they've kept over the years, and they know that students who tend to be have higher test scores tend to be the ones who end up doing, really getting involved and being their supporter.
Oh, that's interesting. They're looking for a quality of alumni. Um, when you say that it's logic and critical thinking, give me an example of a critical thinking skill that is used to succeed on a standardized test.
Okay, well, for example, let's look at the ACT English section. It's called English, or on the SAT it's called Writing Language. On the CLT it's called Grammar. So you can have this passage with all these underlying portions, and there's been 5 passages, 70 questions, 40 minutes to do it in, and it comes down to about 36 seconds per question, plus the 5 passages that you have to read. Even if you're a speed reader, you still logistically cannot finish it on time, and you're going to make mistakes because you're going to rush. So the key is logically to realize that, uh, let's say you're looking at an answer and you see that there's all the words of the answer choices are the same, but the only difference is punctuation. Well, that tells you that the test maker started off with the right answer, and then to create wrong answers, they just took variations of the right answer. So that means logically looking at an answer, don't read it linear, scan it vertically. And when you scan it vertically, you can find the answers that have the most in common with each other, the answers that have the most punctuation, commas, for example, after one word, or a period after another word, or a colon after another word. And when you scan that logically, you can find that the right answer is the one that has the most commonalities of all the other answer choices.
Mm-hmm. Okay, yeah, I have as someone who's taught both in high school and college for many years, I've made out a lot of tests, and I've found the tendency for that to happen in multiple choice questions, and I try to avoid making out multiple choice questions because I don't like them. And because they are subject to these kinds of strategies that, I feel like aren't requiring the students that I had to give me back what I taught them. What you say is don't study for the test, study the test.
Absolutely. So you'll find that there's a lot of companies, and even some big name brand companies, and some of them can be very, very expensive. They teach a lot of content. They teach more math concepts and thousands of vocabulary words and lots of grammar rules and all of that. But these are not content based tests. They are logic based tests. And you can't study for them. You have to study the test itself, how the questions are written, how the answers are written, because it is standardized. And so that's why it's so important that you put your time in on that. I mean, think about it. There's over 171,000 words in the dictionary. And it's not like they're going to send you a list of words to study. You're not going to know which ones are going to be on the test. So, because it's based on logic, even if you don't know what a word means, you can still figure it out.
Yeah. Well, you've given some other guidelines elsewhere that I think are really useful, and certainly you've said something to this effect already. But talk about the importance of pacing yourself during the actual test.
Well, all the new since all the tests are going digital now, you have these built-in clocks that's like a timer that you can either turn off or turn on. And I think it's important that you don't get hung up on one question. Most students will spend a lot of time on a question, and they'll get behind because a very very hard question could be question number two, and a very easy question could be question 28. And so what we tell the students is, look, you come to a question, give it a good 10-second glance over. If you can't answer it quickly, do not waste your time. Do not stress over it. Mark it for review and move on to the next question, and do that all the way through. Go get all the low hanging fruit first,
Mm.
because you could miss out on some easy questions at the end. Then come back through it. And very often your subconscious continues to work on the problem, even if you've moved on. And when you come back to it, you often see it, and you can answer it very quickly. But then go back through the ones, take a little bit more thought and come back through. Maybe make about 3 or 4 passes if you can, because if what happens a lot of times is students will take, they are determined to finish question one and then question two, and then question three, and they'll spend 2 or 3 minutes, and they'll never get to the most of the questions because you're behind by 1 or 2 questions every time you spend that much time. So the
Yeah.
goal is to practice like you play. So when you're at home or at school and you are working on these tests, you're practicing, then you want to do it just like you would at the real test, and take advantage of those tools, the digital tools like the highlighting tool. There's a tool also that will mark out. There's a tool that you can a box will pop up and you can type in some letters and stuff. So yes, you absolutely want to not rush, because these tests are designed for carelessness. With so little time per question, it's really easy to try to rush. But if you understand the patterns and you've been taking a lot of practice tests and learned the strategies and the shortcuts, then you can answer questions very quickly. And if you can't answer the questions quickly, move on, come back to it, because if you save 20, 30 seconds per question every single time, that allows you to come back, and maybe there is a math problem, for example, you do not know the short way to work it out. You have built up so much time that you have that luxury to go ahead and work it out if you need to.
Hmm. Yeah, I had this college admissions counselor say that there'll be 4 to 6 questions on uh, either verbal or quantitative that there's a term that you have to know. There's a vocabulary word that it's just not going to be um, workable unless you know it. And she said, just skip them. You're going to mess up your performance on all the rest if you're stressing over that one thing. And it does it help to guess? How many should you be able to rule out and still guess?
So what you just said was really good, because we emphasize to the kids, you have to know math terms. One of the things is you don't necessarily have to know a vocabulary word to ace the reading section, but if you get to the math section and you don't know what integer means or real number or tangent, you're not going to be able to answer the question. So we do give them a list that, that we tell the students, go through these and make sure you know these. You probably know them, but sometimes the College Board or the ACT company will use a math term that the kids haven't heard since elementary school.
Hmm.
And that's why you need to go back and do that. So you're totally right about that. So what we tell the kids is, do not make guessing your first choice. If you don't know it, mark it for review, skip it, and come back. And If you go through it 3 or 4 times and now you notice there's only a couple minutes left, at that point there's no you have no penalty for guessing, so you can completely guess. And what we tell the students is at that point just do what we call the straight A rule, and that means go back and just pick any letter. It could be A or B or C or D, it doesn't matter, and then mark every single question that you skipped with the same exact letter, and that might up your odds in getting at least some of them right. But don't do that until you've gone through it 3 or 4 times and you've exhausted everything that you know of to try to answer all of them.
Mm-hmm. And composition, is that a significant part of these tests, or is that voluntary to write an
Composition.
essay?
So up until a couple of years ago, the SAT's essay was optional, and then they now they made it mostly omitted. But there are still some states and still some colleges that require the SAT essay. Even the military ACT essay is also optional. But here's the thing: when the essay judges are judging these essays, they're only looking for 6 things, and they basically read the paper in about 30 seconds. So we've had a lot of kids with perfect essay scores because we teach them the 6 things and the templates they need to know. Because again, what they're doing is they're not testing what a great writer you are. They're testing how well you can answer questions under pressure in a short amount of time. How well you put together this essay without even knowing the topic ahead of time or the article that you're going to analyze. So, Leah, whether it's the essay on the SAT or ACT or a supplemental essay that they're writing for college entrance, we really need to emphasize to our kids, whether we're the teacher, the parent, optional is not optional and recommended is required. In other words, we want our kids to go that second mile because pretty much everybody else they're not going to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And if sometimes if an admission counselor is on the fence about a student's application and one student did the optional work and one did not, they're going to go with the one who did the optional work. And when this information, like the applications, are sent to the college, they often go to a room full of sophomores. And these sophomores create 2 piles: the one of the students who did the optional work and those who did not. And often those who did not do it are in the first cut. They don't even move on to the next stage when it comes to college. So I think it's important that we
Well,
teach our kids it's always do what nobody else is going to do.
good advice. That's good advice for the workplace too, you know.
Yes.
um, well, this is really a gold mine, and I just want to have you touch on the timing of these tests, especially what is the significance of the PSAT?
So the PSAT is a money magnet. It in the junior year, and this is what, as you said, you've read my bio and stuff about my son becoming a National Merit Scholar and being in the top 1% of the nation because we learn how to take the test and we learn how to find the patterns and just get a high score. So he was offered so many full rides to college and so many other perks. But it counts in the junior year, and it's a bragging right for colleges to have National Merit Scholars at their school. But unfortunately, what happens is in most schools, and most people don't know this, they often think that the PSAT is just a practice SAT. But the P stands for for preliminary, not practice.
Mhm.
And so you students should always be taking them in the earlier grades, like in 8th grade, ninth grade, 10th grade. Those times do not count, but it helps those students become familiar with the test. It helps lessen the anxiety. It helps to gain that test maturity the sooner that you start. You don't want to put all your eggs into one basket and just hope you'll do well on that in that junior test. You want to be doing it, several years beforehand, because it can be life changing to where your decision goes from how in the world are we going to pay for college to where in the world should we go to because we have so many offers.
Uh-huh. Well, that's great, and yeah. So if you want to do well on the PSAT, you should be preparing and practicing with testing in your sophomore year, or maybe even ninth grade, right?
Oh, absolutely. Well, we have 6th graders who do our program. But yeah, you can take the PSAT. I mean, it's offered in fourth grade and above for like a talent search. But yes, I think a lot of times the anxiety of taking a test is very difficult. But if you've gone in there several times, it's the environment is not a big deal anymore, and you can just relax. And your only goal is to do well on the test, and that comes, of course, with you going in and taking it several times. But yeah, the PSAT is important, and the SAT and PSAT are basically the same test. So if you're studying for one, you're studying for the other one. You don't practice any differently.
Mhm. Um, I noticed something disturbing, on at the end of when one of my kids got their scores back on the test. I can't remember. I think it was the SAT. They had a page that said, based on your scores, these are suggested careers for you. Are they still doing that?
I don't know now that it's digital. You don't get your booklet back. You don't get all the. You used to get everything back in the mail. Now it goes to the student, or they actually they have like a profile when you create some kind of account online. So it's very possible that it still does it or doesn't do that. I don't think that a test is going to predict, your career. There's too many variations. Uh, but since I've been doing this, I started with my son in 2001. The SATs changed three times, so I've had to redo and revamp and analyze the tests and create a new program three times. So it but now that they're all going digital, although the ACT is going to have a paper component, so you'll have the option of doing paper and or digital on the ACT. But there are some free tools that they do give you that help, but I don't see how a test can do that. The test just shows you that you are a good critical thinker. And here's the good thing though, Leah, there's two types of students. There are the good test takers. These are the students who tend to score well naturally. They are the logically minded student. It's very intuitive to them to see patterns. But even them, they don't know everything. And sometimes learning just a few more little things can put them over the top. Then you have the other student, which was what we call the rule follower. That is the student who stresses on every question. They overthink everything. They
Mhm.
second guess themselves, and they end up, having a lot of anxiety. Now, here's the good news, and they would call themselves a bad test taker. But the good news is that logic is not a personality trait. Logic is a trained skill. So anybody can become a better logical thinker and do well and beat these tests, whether it comes to you naturally or not. It's like someone gifted in music or sports. Someone who's not naturally gifted can work hard and also attain success. So that's a good thing about a standardized test. It's you don't have to be not only not a genius, but anybody can do well. And that's why I'm such a big believer in starting early, learning how to take these tests because you can't get time back. And as kids get older and they get more into high school, they are going to get busier with more school, homework. Maybe they have a part time job, play sports, friends, church. They're very busy. And so to squeeze one more thing in makes it very difficult. So they
Mhm.
often don't get a very high score, which means they don't necessarily get into the college of their choice and probably not get a lot of scholarship money.
Mhm. Yeah, and I want to clarify the reason I thought it was disturbing when we got it was, this student wanted to either go into business or the ministry, and it was recommended. There were like six possible jobs recommended, and they were all working for the government, for one thing, and maybe a public school teacher, a counselor for in some setting, I can't remember, a rehab counselor or something, and
Right,
a social worker, and of course nothing related to the clergy or anything. They wouldn't go
right.
there. But
Yeah,
if a student had taken that seriously, well, and it's not where they've ended up today. None of those are anywhere near what they're doing. and they're much, much, much more lucrative things that they're doing and more
Right.
gratifying.
Right. Well, and nowadays, I think the generation now will probably have 14 or 15 different jobs in their lifetime, and
Yep.
so I think what we have to add, one of the things when our kids graduate from high school, they're constantly being asked, "What are you going to do with your life? What are you going to do with your life?" Like as if we all have our life planned out at 18 years old, or maybe even 22 or 23 when you graduate college.
Mhm.
I think we need to change the conversation to our kids when they graduate is what is the first thing you want to do? What is the
Yeah,
first thing? And then from there, you may go on and do some other things.
sure. Yeah, these tests are not aptitude tests, and,
No.
I will say the LSAT, I think, is kind of an aptitude test. Um, I when I took it, I really there are different kinds of mental processes involved. I think in that it's a lot of analysis of something you just read, and you have to really read carefully and interpret. Um, and it gets at the kind of thinking you have to do as a lawyer for most kinds of law practice. But most of these are not that. They're not intended to be. You don't take the math section to see if you're going to go into mathematics. What do you think about gap years, and what do colleges think of gap years?
Oh, colleges love them.
Really?
They, oh, absolutely, because they're finding that students who take a year off for school, they have a better clarity of their major. They've had time to think about it. When you have students going from high school right on into college and two-thirds of them dropping out, there's a problem. Either they were either not prepared in high school, which happens a lot of times, or they get a lot of freedom and they just kind of blow off their studies and all of that. A lot of things happen, or they just can't handle the workload because a lot of times high school students are barely cracking a book and breezing through high school, and they don't realize that you get to college and there could be 5, 6, 7 hours of studying per class per day. And so when you take a gap year, we have a lot of students who do that. They'll take a gap year and study for the SATs or ACTs because they know that they can get full rides to college based on how high their scores are. So it just allows the student time to really think about it because it's a huge expense, especially if you're going to pay for it. Hopefully, they don't have to pay for it, but to commit to that kind of money, uh, is it and is this really what I want to do for the rest of my life? So yes, and you can even apply and get accepted and get scholarship money, and you can even defer that if you want by doing a gap year too.
That's neat. What do you think about letters of recommendation? What's the strategy on getting a good one? Are they that important? Do you get extra ones?
I think they're very important because I think it's someone saying something about you that's not in that's unbiased, hopefully, but also is someone who can say something about yourself that's not already in your application. Your application, you only get so many characters to put down, and this is a person that knows you, and you want to make sure they do know you. Someone who uh, can really maybe give a vivid portrait of who that this person really is and what they know about them. I mean, you definitely want to have at least a couple academic letters of recommendation. For example, could be a teacher or a counselor, and you definitely want to have maybe one or two non-academic, which could be a boss, it could be a coach, it could be some kind of mentor. But I do think they're important because it just helps the student become more to see how well-rounded they are, because colleges are not only looking for well-rounded students, they're looking for well-rounded classrooms. they,
Mhm,
they like they like diversity, and they don't want a cookie cutter classroom, and so they
mhm.
can people who can speak into about someone else's life can say something differently that maybe weren't able to put into your application or your resume. I think also it's important that when you're getting a letter of recommendation, you need to give that person a 90-day lead time to 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 create it for you, because people are busy. Everybody probably has a family, they have a job, they got things going on themselves, and you really don't want to spring it on them the week before you need it. So You want to, be courteous. You also want to send them a thank you card, maybe a Starbucks gift card or something with it. But let them know you appreciate it because they did take the time to do that. So I do
Mhm.
think they're important. But I think also sometimes people will say, well, what if I get someone famous to write it for me? And the question would be, well, do they know you? If they
Yeah,
don't know you,
they might
what
go.
does that even mean?
Yeah.
But I think sometimes the letters of recommendation, one of the kind of the sort of the inside secrets to getting into a top tier school or an Ivy League, and that is to get some kind of internship with one of the professors at, let's say you're thinking about going to Penn State or you're thinking about going to Stanford or something, some top tier school. If you can get an internship with that professor or that faculty member of that school, they can write you a stellar recommendation that is going to really stand out when it comes to you applying for that school.
Oh, yeah. Well, I when I asked my friend who's in college admissions yesterday, she said that while the school wants their student body to be well-rounded and diverse, it's not important to be well-rounded as a candidate, um, as an applicant. They would prefer that you show a focus and a set of interests that you know how to pursue and that you know how you would benefit from their college. That you're looking for something, that you have curiosity, and that you're going to pursue a goal. And she also said that she thinks that parents are spending way too much time on sports in the high school years. There's a tiny chance that you're going to be a Division I athlete, that you're going to get a full ride through this or that, and not to hang all your hopes on all those thousands of hours that you're going to ask your child to be out on the playing field or going off to away games or whatever. It really is hard on the family. It can be expensive just to do that, and it does take away from other interests and other
Right.
academic pursuits.
Well, absolutely. The colleges give the academic money first before they give the athletic money. And there's only 6 headcount sports that will actually get a full ride to. And one of them is definitely not soccer. And so if you're not involved in one of those headcount sports, which is football, men and women's basketball, tennis, volleyball, and gymnastics, then there's no full rides available. So a school might offer 40, $50,000 to a school for some of their soccer players, but they'll divvy that up amongst 4, 5, 6 kids. So you might get $5,000 to go to a school that 40, 50,000 a year. And so it's important. Nothing wrong with sports at all, but I do agree with you. I think uh, you also have to think about the possibility of getting hurt.
Oh,
That then your dreams are all gone. So if you're hanging everything on that one sport, like I had a friend whose daughter was kind of Olympic bound gymnastics, and then she fell and broke her arm, and that sets you back months, and that just kind of takes away the whole thing.
oh,
I absolutely agree. Again, there's very few that will attain that full ride, but also even beyond that, of those, how many of those actually even go into some kind of professional sport? The
right.
the percentage is extremely low on that as well.
Well, I have one last question I've been really eager to ask you. Since you have been in this field for 20 years, interfacing with thousands of kids and their parents, how do you see high school kids and their families changing over that time period?
Well, it's interesting because I have taught tens of thousands of students. I've taught in most states and 5 other countries, and our program is all over the United States and in many countries. When I first started out, I really saw students who actually were more excited about going to college. Now, what we're seeing now with technology changing, we are in the fourth industrial revolution right now, where things are rapidly changing all the time. And so I think students nowadays tend to be more confused because they're 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 somewhat disconnected because of technology, because of their phones, and I think that also has distracted them. So when you hear about an average student spending 8 to 10 hours a day on some kind of technology, some kind of device, whether it's a phone, computer, a video game, you're 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 not seeing the kind of dedication of pursuit of education. I think a lot of students now think that there's so many easy outs. Like if I just create some viral video, I'll be a millionaire. You know, if I just play these video games, everybody's going to come and watch me, and I'm going to make so much money. And so I think there's this false sense uh, of your future based on something that maybe a handful of people have done. It's not tried and true. It's not. It's something other that has, I think, it has and probably will continue to lead students astray. So you see that students not looking to be that doctor, that lawyer, that teacher as much as you did before,
Yeah.
because they think there's, well, if I just create something other, I can have some kind of instant success. And so I think the hard work is missing. The work to be done, I don't have to do that because I can see the easy road. And that's not every student, of course. I teach not only homeschool students, public, private, parochial school students. I teach a lot of students, but I still think that that mentality is there. The As parents, I think it's our job to get our kids to adulthood, and curtailing that kind of uh, you know being consumed by just the web and everything. And I think if I just Google, I don't have to study because if I just Google it, I can find the answer. So I think it's brought in a lot of laziness and a lot of um, just the the ability to realize that I don't have to put in the effort that like my mom and dad did or my grandma did. And I think it's almost like raising a lazy generation. And I love what Zig Ziglar says. He says you can't get upset for the results you don't get for the work you don't do.
Yeah,
and
that's
and
good.
I think that's kind of where we're at. I think we're going to see a generation that are not going to uh, have a lot of ambition as they should, and those who do are really going to pass them up because they're the ones who are going to put in the hard work. They're going to do what they need to do to get it done. So I think it's unfortunate. I think the Pandora, it's already been let out of the box. Pandora's box has already been opened up, and I think to rein it back in is very difficult, but it's not impossible. I think as parents, and of course technology is a whole other thing we could talk about, but I think parents need to wake up and realize that um, in a nutshell, we've all been duped. Some of the most famous technological brains like Steve Jobs and Evan Constantinople and the heads of Facebook and Google and all the Silicon Valley, um, none of them allow their children to have any kind of screens or devices. No phones, no TVs in their room, no games.
Yeah.
They go to a school called the Wardoff School of the Peninsula where there's no technology allowed at all, and they are even discourage it at home. And these
Mhm.
students go on to 90 something percent of them to top tier schools. And so if they're not even letting their own children do this, then why are we as parents doing this? They've taken us for a ride, and we've bought into it. So
Mhm.
we've definitely been duped.
Well, I love your insights, Jean, and thank you so much for taking time out to instruct my audience. And if they want to get in touch with you, what should they do?
Well, you can certainly email us at info@collegeprepgenius.com. You can call our, if you have any questions, you can certainly call our phone. It's listed on our website. Uh, yeah, we'd love to answer any questions that you may have. I'm right now in the middle of my speaking session season, so I'm traveling and I'm doing a lot of speaking at conferences, but not every day. But if they have any questions, yeah, do contact us, and we'd love to know how we can serve their families and help them also hopefully get into the college of their choice and hopefully not have to pay for it and graduate debt free.
That sounds wonderful. Well, we appreciate it. We'll
Thank you,
see you
Leah.
next time.
Thanks, Leah.
Everybody, rate and review this program and come back and listen to one of the related episodes or our next one. Bye-bye. Subscribe and review Conversation Balloons on your favorite podcast platform. Find me at leahfarish.com and on Instagram at LeahFarish.